The sun dipped low behind the vast Idaho forest, casting long shadows across the rugged gravel road that twisted through towering pines. Park Ranger Melissa Keegan drove her Jeep slowly, scanning the tree line. It had been a long day of backcountry patrols, made longer by the cryptic radio message she received just before sunset. Unregistered activity, Section C, possible unauthorized occupancy. Cabin 12. Cabin 12 had been vacant for nearly a decade. Boarded up after a landslide rendered it inaccessible to guests. The Forest Service never bothered to renovate it, assuming nature would reclaim it. But someone, apparently, had moved in. Melissa adjusted her utility belt, resting a hand near her holster. In her 10 years of service, she'd had run-ins with all kinds: curious campers, poachers, stubborn hermits. But there was something off about this one. When she reached the clearing, the old cabin stood as if nothing had changed, its wooden walls faded, roof sagging, but thin trails of smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. Melissa stepped out, gravel crunching beneath her boots. She knocked hard on the warped door. No answer. "Forest Service," she called. "You're trespassing on federal property. Step outside, please." Silence. She reached for the handle, but the door creaked open before she touched it. A man stood there, tall, lean, with salt and pepper hair and deeply lined features. He looked like he belonged in a Hemingway novel, not hiding in an abandoned cabin. "You're the ranger?" he asked. "I'm Melissa Keegan. This is restricted land. I need to see some ID." The man didn't flinch. "I don't have any." "Then you're going to have to come with me." He looked at her, calm and unbothered. "That won't be necessary." Her patience thinned. "Sir, you're not in a position to—" "I think I am," he interrupted softly. Melissa's training kicked in. She kept her hand near her sidearm. "Step out of the cabin, now." Instead of complying, he stepped back inside and sat down at a dusty table. "How much do you know about what happened here 10 years ago?" Melissa paused. "There was a landslide. A hiker died." He nodded. "A girl. Her name was Claire. She was 12. Melissa remembered the file, one of the park's oldest open cases. The body had never been recovered. "What's your connection?" "She was my daughter." The weight of his words struck her. "You were Thomas Avery?" He didn't answer, but that name, long buried in a forgotten case file, surfaced like a ghost. Thomas Avery had vanished weeks after the search was called off. Some thought he'd taken his own life. Others whispered darker theories. "You disappeared?" Melissa said. "I came back." She stepped inside cautiously. The cabin smelled of pine and ash. On the mantel was a photo, dusty but visible. Claire, grinning in a red windbreaker, holding a fishing pole. "What are you doing here?" Melissa asked. Avery looked at the fire. "Waiting for the truth." Melissa crossed her arms. "What truth?" He stood and opened a wooden chest in the corner. Inside were maps, notebooks, field logs, detailed records of hikes, coordinates, and surveillance entries. Pages filled with diagrams of rock shifts and old maintenance schedules. "I've spent the last 10 years following leads no one wanted to look into," he said. "Claire didn't die in that landslide. She was pushed." Melissa's breath caught. "That's not possible. The landslide was—" "Triggered," he interrupted. She shook her head. "By what? An act of God?" "By a controlled blast." Melissa frowned. "You're saying someone set off explosives. For what?" "To cover a trail," he said. "Someone was drilling illegally in Section D. Seismic sensors registered tremors that were never explained. The mining company buried it. So did the Forest Service." She stared at him. "That's a serious accusation. Look in your own archives. you'll find that permits were requested and denied, then approved in secret, signed by a man named Franklin Bowers. Melissa's stomach turned. Bowers had been the director of operations back then. He died 3 years ago. "I've seen those records," she said. "They were cleared. Because I wasn't around to contest them." Melissa hesitated. "Why come back now?" Avery's voice grew firm. "Because I found something." He lifted a rusted metal box onto the table. Inside were dozens of tapes, surveillance footage, drone images, some marked with dates that aligned with the week Claire vanished. "Where did you get these?" "I had help, an old friend who stayed in the service long after I left." Melissa leaned over, flipping through a few tapes. One showed a construction crew in the restricted zone, working late at night. "This could ruin people." Avery nodded. "Good, they ruined a child." The room felt smaller, heavier. Melissa didn't know what to say. "You said you came back for the truth," she whispered. "I also came to make sure it's heard," Avery replied. Melissa pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, this is Keegan. I need a transport at Cabin 12, and notify the chief. I have evidence relating to case file 387-D. There was a long pause on the other end before dispatch confirmed. Avery stood. "You should know something before this all gets very loud." "What's that?" "I'm not just Claire's father. I was once head of environmental crimes under the Department of the Interior. I oversaw criminal investigations involving government-contracted mining firms." He looked her in the eye. "I know exactly how deep they'll bury this if they get the chance." Melissa felt the weight of that statement settle in her gut. "Then we don't let them." He gave a slow, tired smile. "That's why I waited until the right ranger came along." The next week was chaos. Federal agents descended on the station. Melissa handed over the tapes and filed a 72-page report. Investigations began quietly but quickly. Records were unsealed. Several retired officials were subpoenaed. A massive lawsuit was filed by a whistleblower group that had been waiting for proof. The Forest Service found itself at the center of a national scandal. For years, it had allowed deep drilling in protected land under falsified permits. Avery's evidence became the keystone in dismantling the operation. Melissa, once a quiet ranger with a routine life, became the department's most visible agent of change. Reporters camped outside her station. Protesters marched in Boise, demanding reform. Claire Avery's name trended on every major platform for days. One night, Melissa returned to the cabin. It had been cleared and decommissioned again, but she found a single envelope on the hearth, addressed simply. To M. Inside was a photo of Claire, the same one from the mantel. On the back, written in careful block letters, "Thank you for seeing the forest, not just the trees." There was no return address, no signature, just the initials, T.A. Melissa looked up at the dark forest, the wind rustling softly through the trees. Justice had taken a decade, but it had come